I'm not a good man. If you're looking for a hero, you've come to the wrong place. But if you want the truth, the kind of truth that burns and stays with you long after the lights go out, then you better sit down and listen. I've lived a long time and I've seen a lot of things, but what I did to Mark and Sarah is the one thing that still follows me like a shadow. And I've got many more stories like this one, stories that most folks are too scared to tell. So do us both a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. You're going to want to hear every word of this, and you're going to want to be here when the next one drops. Trust me, you've never heard a story told quite like this. Now, let me tell you about the Miller family. From the outside, they were perfect. You know the type they had the White House with the porch wing, the two kids who never seemed to get dirty, and a garden that looked like something out of a magazine. Mark was a hardworking man, always had a smile for everyone, and Sarah was the kind of woman who would bring you a pie just because it was Tuesday. They were happy, truly, deeply happy, and I hated them for it. Every morning, I'd sit on my porch and watch them. I'd see Mark kiss her goodbye before he went to work. I'd see them laughing over nothing at all while they pulled weeds in the front yard. It felt like a personal insult. You see, my life wasn't like that. My house was quiet, my heart was cold, and instead of looking at them and feeling glad that some good still existed in this world, I felt a hunger. I wanted to see if that kind of love was real, or if it was just a thin layer of paint that I could scratch away with my fingernail. I didn't wake up one day and decide to ruin them. It started small. It started with a look, a word here and there. I'm a patient man. I know how to wait. I know that if you want to bring down a giant tree, you don't start with an axe. You start by letting a little rot get into the roots. You let the water seep in where it shouldn't. You wait for the wind to do the rest of the work for you. Mark and I used to grab a drink every now and then. He looked up to me. He thought I was a wise old man who had it all figured out. He'd come over to my place, sit in a chair by the fire, and tell me how lucky he was. He'd talk about Sarah like she was an angel, and I'd just nod and smile. Oh, while I was looking for the crack in the armor, I was looking for the one thing I could use to start the fire. It's easy to break something beautiful. Most people think it takes a big explosion, a grand betrayal, or a massive lie, but it's not like that at all. It's the little things. It's the things you don't say. It's the way you look at someone when they aren't looking back. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I didn't feel a lick of shame. I wanted to see them break. I wanted to see that happy home crumble into the dirt, and I was more than happy to be the one to give it a little push. I'm going to tell you exactly how I did it. I'm going to tell you the words I whispered and the seeds I planted. It's a dark path we're walking down, but stay with me. You need to know how easily a life can be undone. Just keep listening. It started on a Tuesday night. The air was thick and heavy, the kind of night where you can hear the crickets from a mile away. Mark came over to my porch. He had a couple of cold beers in his hand and a look on his face that said he just wanted to talk. He sat down in the old wooden chair next to mine, the one that creaks every time you move. He looked happy, but I could see he was tired. That's the thing about happy people. They're usually too tired to notice when someone is digging a hole right under their feet. I didn't start with a lie. Lies are dangerous. If you get caught in one, the whole game is over. No, I started with the truth, but I twisted it just enough to make it taste like poison. We were sitting there looking out at the road, and I mentioned how I'd seen Sarah out in town earlier that day. I told him she looked beautiful, which was true, but then I paused, and I let the silence hang there for a second too long. I saw him tilt his head just a little bit, waiting for me to finish. I told him I'd seen her talking to a man in the grocery store parking lot. I said it like it was nothing. I said they looked like they were having a real deep conversation. Now, Sarah was a friendly woman. She talked to everyone. It was probably just a neighbor or someone from her church, but I didn't say that. I just said they looked close. I said I was glad to see she had such good friends she can lean on. When Mark was stuck at the office late, I saw the change in his eyes right then. It was fast, like a shadow passing over a field. He didn't say anything at first. He just took a long pull from his beer. He was trying to act like it didn't bother him, but I knew better. I just dropped a tiny drop of ink into a glass of clear water. It wasn't much, but you couldn't unsee it. The water wasn't clear anymore. For the next few weeks, I didn't have to do much. I just watched. I'd see him coming home from work, and instead of running inside to hug his wife, he'd stand by his truck for a minute. He was thinking, he was wondering. Every time she smiled at her phone, he'd wonder who was on the other side of that screen. Every time she stayed out an hour later than she said she would, he'd think about that man in the parking lot. I'd invite him over more often. I'd ask him how things were going at home. And when he'd say everything was fine, I'd give him a look, not a mean look, a sad look, like I knew something he didn't, like I was sorry for him. That's the cruelest thing you can do to a man. Make him feel like everyone else knows a secret that he's too blind to see. It eats at a man's pride, and once the pride starts to go, everything else follows pretty quick. I remember one night particularly well. Mark was sitting there staring at his shoes. He asked me if I thought a woman could ever really be happy with just one man forever. He looked so lost, my heart should have broken for him, but instead it felt like a win. I told him that the world is a big place, and sometimes people get bored of the same old view, no matter how pretty it is. I told him that even the best houses can have termites. You can't see until the floor drops out from under you. He didn't go home for 2 hours after that. He just sat there in the dark with me, letting those words sink in. I was the only one he was talking to about this. He couldn't talk to Sarah because he didn't want to seem crazy. He couldn't talk to his friends because he was embarrassed. So he talked to me, he trusted me, and that was his biggest mistake. I wasn't his friend. I was the one holding the match, waiting for the wind to pick up. Stay right where you are. We're just getting to the part where the first sparks started to fly. You won't believe what happened next, and you surely won't believe what I told Sarah when Mark wasn't around to hear it. Don't go anywhere. I couldn't just leave it at Mark. That's only half the job. You see, a marriage is like a bridge. If you only cut the cables on one side, the thing might still hang on. You've got to cut them both if you want to see the whole thing fall into the river. So I waited for my moment with Sarah. I found her out by those rose bushes of hers a few days later. She was sweating, her hair sticking to her forehead, but she still looked like a picture. I walked over, acting like the sweet old neighbor everyone thought I was. I told her the garden was looking a bit thirsty. Then I told her she looked a bit thirsty too. Not for water, but for the truth. I started talking about Mark. I told her he'd been spending a lot of time on my porch lately, which she already knew. But then I said I was worried about him. I told her he seemed like a man who was carrying a heavy secret. I told her he kept checking his watch, looking down the road like he was waiting for someone else to show up. I told her I'd heard him on the phone, speaking low, the way a man speaks when he doesn't want his wife to hear. She stopped clipping those roses. The shears just hung there in her hand. She looked at me with those big, honest eyes and asked me what I meant. I just shook my head and looked away. I told her I shouldn't have said anything. I told her Mark was a good man, and I'm sure there was a perfectly good reason he was being so secretive lately. I used that word, secretive, like it was a dirty habit. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was a smart woman, but even the smartest person can be blinded by doubt. I just handed her a magnifying glass and told her to go look for flaws. And when you look for flaws, you're going to find them, even if you have to make them up yourself. I told her she deserved better than to be kept in the dark. That night, I sat on my porch, and I didn't even have to listen hard. I could hear the voices coming from their house. They weren't yelling yet. It was that low, sharp kind of talking that cuts deeper than any scream. The lights stayed on in their kitchen until 3 in the morning. I sat there in the dark, rocking back and forth, feeling the cool night air on my face. I felt powerful. I felt like a god sitting on a mountain, watching the little people struggle in the valley I'd flooded. The next morning, Mart didn't kiss her goodbye. He didn't even look at her. He just got in his truck and drove away, tires spitting gravel. Sarah didn't come out to the garden. She stayed inside behind the curtains. The porch swing sat empty, moving just a little bit in the breeze, like a ghost was sitting there. The rot was spreading. It was moving up the walls now, and there wasn't a thing they could do to stop it. But I wasn't done. The real blow, the one that would finish them off for good, was yet to come, and I knew exactly what to do to make it happen. You're going to want to hear this next part, because it's where everything truly falls apart. Stay with me. Have you ever seen a man's spirit leave his body while he's still standing? It's a quiet thing. No flash of light, no big noise, just a hollow look in the eyes that says there's nothing left inside. If you're still here, it means you've got the stomach for the truth, and I appreciate that. Not many people do. Before I get into the part where everything turned to ash, do yourself a favor. Check that you're subscribed. You don't want to miss how this ends, and you definitely don't want to miss what I've got coming next. This is the kind of story that changes how you look at your neighbors. By the time Friday rolled around, the air in our little neighborhood felt like it was about to snap. You could feel it in your bones. The Miller's house, that beautiful white house, looked different now. The windows looked like dark eyes, and the grass was starting to grow just a little too long. Mark hadn't been to work in 2 days. I knew because his truck stayed in the driveway, crooked and messy. like he didn't care where it landed anymore. He came to my porch one last time. He didn't have any beers this time. His clothes were wrinkled, and he smelled like he'd been sitting in a room full of old smoke. He sat down and he didn't say a word for 10 minutes. He just stared at the road. Then, in a voice so quiet, I almost missed it, he asked me if I'd seen anything else. He was begging me to tell him he was wrong. He was looking for a lifeline, but I didn't give him one. I leaned in close, so close I could see the red lines in his eyes. I told him I wasn't sure if I should say it. I played the part of the reluctant friend perfectly. Then I delivered the kill shot. I told him I'd seen Sarah's car parked behind the old motel on the edge of town the night before. I told him I saw her walking into a room with a man who looked a lot like the one from the grocery store. It was a total lie. Sarah had been home all night. I knew because I'd watched her shadow through the kitchen window from my own dark living room. But Mark didn't know that. He believed me because he had nothing else to hold on to. I saw his hands start to shake. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stood up real slow and walked back across the street. I watched him go inside. I went into my house, turned off all the lights, and sat by my front window. I didn't have to wait long. About 20 minutes later, the screaming started. It wasn't just an argument, it was the sound of a world ending. I heard glass breaking. I heard Sarah crying high and thin like a wounded animal. I heard Mark's voice, deep and full of a rage I'd never heard from him before. He was calling her names that no man should ever call a woman he loves. Then came the sound I'll never forget. The sound of a suitcase being thrown down the stairs. The front door flew open, and Sarah ran out. She wasn't wearing shoes. She was just running, crying so hard she could barely breathe. She got into her car and sped away, nearly hitting a tree on her way out. Mark stood on the porch, his chest heaving, looking out at the empty street. He looked at my house for a second. I stayed in the shadows, smiling. The house was dark after that. No more porch swings. No more laughter. No more perfect garden. I'd done it. I'd taken that beautiful thing and I'd smashed it into 1,000 pieces just to see if I could. But the story isn't over yet. There's one last thing I did. The thing that ensured they could never, ever fix what was broken. It's the darkest part of all, and I'm going to tell it to you right now. Stay right there. Most people think the hardest part is the breaking. They think the explosion is the end of the story, but they're wrong. The real work, the real dark work, is making sure those pieces never, ever fit back together again. You stayed with me this far, and that tells me you've got a bit of that same hunger for the truth that I do. You aren't afraid of the shadows. Before I tell you the very last thing I did, the thing that sealed their fate forever, make sure you've joined our little circle here. Hit that subscribe button, because the stories I have yet to tell make this one look like a bedtime story. You're going to want to be here for what's coming next. A week went by after that big fight. The Miller house was as quiet as a grave. Mark was still there, but he wasn't living. He was just haunting the place. He was drinking his breakfast, luncheon, and dinner, and then the phone rang. It was Sarah. She didn't call Mark. She was too scared of him. She called me. She called me from her sister's house 3 towns over. She was sobbing so hard I could barely make out the words. She told me she didn't understand what had happened. She swore to God she'd never been to that motel. She begged me, as an old friend and a neighbor, to talk to Mark. She wanted me to tell him she loved him. She told me she was going to drive over that evening just to talk, just to try and fix the world. She trusted me. She thought I was the bridge that would bring her back home. I told her I'd handle it. I told her I'd sit Mark down and soften his heart. I told her to come at sunset and everything would be fine, but that's not what I did. I went over to Mark's house an hour before she was supposed to arrive. I found him sitting in the dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat down and I told him a new lie. I told him I had heard from a friend that Sarah was coming back, but not to apologize. I told him she was coming with a lawyer to take the kids and every cent he had left. I told him she was coming to finish him off while he was down. I saw the last bit of light in his eyes go out and get replaced by a cold, hard stone. When her car pulled into the driveway at sunset, she had hope in her eyes. She stepped out of that car, reaching for him, but Mark didn't even let her get to the porch. He met her in the grass, and the words he used, they were the kind of words that kill a soul. He told her if she ever set foot on that property again, he'd have her arrested. He told her he never wanted to see her face as long as he lived, and I stood on my porch watching it all. I saw Sarah crumble. She didn't fight. She didn't cry anymore. She just got back in her car and drove away. She didn't come back, not that week, not that year, not ever. The house was sold a month later. Mark moved away to some city out west. I don't know where he is, and I don't care. Now the house across the street is empty. The garden is nothing but weeds and dirt. People around here ask me if I feel bad, and they ask me how I sleep at night, knowing I tore a family apart for no reason at all. The truth is, I sleep just fine because in a world where everyone is pretending to be happy, I found something real. I found out that even the strongest love is just a house of cards. All it takes is one person who isn't afraid to breathe on it. I'm not a good man. I told you that at the start, but I'm the only one who told you the truth. This story is over, but mine is just beginning. I'll see you in the next one.